My name is Dr. Ricky Keys, and I am focused on equity of opportunity, not equity of outcome. I believe that we, in this country, have several challenges that will impact our ability to grow in many different ways. I believe that financial growth, social growth, economic growth, which is different from financial growth, geographic growth, resource growth, and other ways. We've had leaders in the past who have moved the African American community to significant positions of power and prosperity. They used essential strategies and tactics to help address some of the systemic challenges this country faces. We understand that practical approaches used in the past do not work as effectively in the future. Opponents find ways to counter previously effective moves. Leaders move from one position to another, and other dynamics occur that make what was effectively done in the past less effective. One of the primary approaches that was used by the Black community in the past was to stir up drama and embarrass private sector institutions into doing things that they should be doing. These approaches, especially in the digital age, are less effective. During the waning years of his life, Dr. Martin Luther King changed course from a purely civil rights agenda focused on voting and public accommodations to a broader economic strategy. Malcolm X went from a position of classifying every white person as the devil to willingly working with like-minded individuals of every stripe. While what I am suggesting is in no way as substantial as either of these approaches, I do believe that in the future, we must continually enhance, if not outright change, our strategy to achieve the desired end. So, this brings me to Attorney Benjamin Crump. Attorney Crump has a stellar resume and history of accomplishments. His primary specialty areas are civil rights and catastrophic personal injury cases, such as wrongful death lawsuits. He was the lead attorney in high-profile cases such as Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Jacob Blake. He was recently involved in fighting for people poisoned during the Flint water crisis and supported plaintiffs behind the 2019 Johnson & Johnson baby powder lawsuit alleging the company's talcum powder product led to ovarian cancer diagnoses. Recently, Attorney Crump has taken on a new legal advocacy mission. Banks have received extraordinary benefits and have been allowed to grow unfettered for years. After the 2008 housing crisis, Federal Reserve Secretary Ben Bernanke supported a program called quantitative easing. This program intended to boost the economy, making job opportunities available to ordinary citizens. Quantitative easing allowed the central bank, in this case the Federal Reserve, to purchase predetermined amounts of government bonds or other financial assets, for example, municipal bonds, corporate bonds, and stocks, to inject money into the economy to expand economic activity. This program helped bring the U.S. economy out of a deep, man-made recession and helped ensure that inflation did not fall below the central bank's inflation target. However, QE had a substantially negative side effect. The program was unable to encourage banks to lend. It was also unable to encourage potential borrowers to borrow. The result is banks were able to profit without risking their capital. All they had to do was exist, hold money on their balance sheets, and make safe investments. The result was billions of dollars for Wall Street and practically nothing for Main Street. One of the biggest beneficiaries was Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo took advantage of this and many other programs established by the central bank. Wells Fargo received a $25 billion bailout from the Fed in 2008. The bank ultimately repaid the loan in December 2009, making it one of the last banks to repay taxpayers' money it needed to stay afloat. The Wells Fargo account fraud scandal created millions of fraudulent savings and checking accounts for Wells Fargo customers without their consent. Wells Fargo's customers began to notice the fraud after being charged unanticipated fees and receiving unexpected credit or debit cards or lines of credit. Initial reports blamed individual Wells Fargo branch workers and managers for the problem and sales incentives associated with selling multiple solutions of financial products. Wells Fargo executives undertook a top-down pressure technique to open as many accounts as possible through what they called cross-selling. The bank was forced to pay $3 billion for the fake account scandal. Recently, Wells Fargo was involved in a racial discrimination lawsuit regarding its mortgage lending practices. The U.S. Attorney in the Northern District of California filed the lawsuit on April 14th. The suit states that the bank approved more white borrowers for a mortgage loan than black applicants in 2020, when the Fed CARES Act created by the COVID-19 pandemic prompted historically low interest rates. It also alleges that black clients, including those with high credit scores, were given an average interest rate of 3.34% compared with 3.23% for white borrowers. Attorney Ben Crump represents the clients involved in this lawsuit.
Was indiscriminate.
Yes.
Indiscriminating. Seems like the only common denominator was the color of the applicant's skin, Suzanne. And so, I tell you, Wells Fargo is one of the biggest banks in the country. It is believed that they're the largest homeowner lender in America. Their corporate practices determine the financial health and opportunities and lack of for millions of Black Americans. Wells Fargo says its mission is helping customers succeed financially, but Attorney Scheer, they are not helping Black Americans succeed financially when they engage in a pattern and practice of corporate behavior that denies financial opportunities to Black customers and charges them more for the same services that they charge white customers for. Wells Fargo says it's committed to improving communities, but they have held back Black communities by denying loans and charging higher interest rates to customers just because the color of their skin.
Attorney Crump represents the clients involved in this suit. I do not believe that there should be a systematic strategy to make someone do something when there is no cause. My focus is and will always be to make sure that any pursuit is data-centric. If we cannot measure the overtures, we are unable to manage the returns. Wells Fargo has benefited substantially from governmental support and assistance. Yet the company has engaged in discriminatory practices and has been fined for these practices. Wells Fargo touts its community lending, investment, and service bona fides when countering any argument. The bank received an outstanding rating on its recent Community Reinvestment Act evaluation. The Federal Reserve, FDIC, and Comptroller of the Currency evaluates banks to determine whether they are helping meet the needs of every community, specifically low to moderate income areas. Wells Fargo received an outstanding score on the lending test despite the lawsuit. It received a satisfactory score on the investment tax. And finally, it received a satisfactory score on the service test. Getting an outstanding or satisfactory rating with CRA is no minor issue. Banks are unable to grow organically, so the only way to satisfy their Wall Street backers is by merging or acquiring another bank. Having a CRA rating that does not meet standards causes them to have a harder time doing this. Wells Fargo has a fascinating market penetration rate throughout this country. According to S&P Global Market Intelligence, a net 2,126 bank branches closed across the country in 2020. This report suggests that banks have accelerated plans to consolidate their branch footprints as the COVID-19 pandemic encouraged consumer adoption of mobile and digital channels. Further, the report said that banks have faced a tough operating environment with low interest rates pressuring margins and forcing a reconsideration of expenses. 2020 bank closures was a record until 2021, when a net 2,927 branches closed. Nationwide, Wells Fargo closed a net 267 bank branches last year, the most of any bank. Most of these branches were in what the bank would term low-performing communities. Now, it would be hard to show the impact of closures on specific communities. However, we can use Fulton County in Georgia as an example to examine Wells Fargo's current footprint and whether their CRA rating is accurate. As mentioned earlier, Wells Fargo's CRA score is based on 3 quantitative indicators. The bank's pattern and practice of lending, investing, and service determines whether it complies with the law. Regulators can easily quantify Wells Fargo's investment score. Wells Fargo and other banks that make investments in specific communities have been fraught with controversy. Investing in slum properties has substantially impacted communities negatively. While quantitative, the CRA's service test is more qualitative. Support for a community program infuses monetary and human resources into a community. However, measuring the impact of these resources on the community is less effective. In other words, does supporting a Little League baseball team help improve the financial viability of an assessment area? Wells Fargo has a questionable record of having supported programs that enhance a community's financial viability. Now, the rationale behind the 1977 Community Reinvestment Act was that banks were physically drawing lines around specific zip codes and refusing to extend credit in these areas. It is hard to measure Wells Fargo's lending score without delving into the HMDA data, but reports suggest that the company is failing to meet their obligations. A practical approach is to examine a company's footprint. In other words, where are the bank's branches in Fulton County? We can then examine the demographic profile of potential customers served once the branches have been identified. The following maps describe Wells Fargo's footprint in Fulton County. The first map provides a heat map and an analysis showing the 0 to 2, 2 to 4, and 4 to 6 mile market served by Wells Fargo. The analysis shows that Wells Fargo's primary market is better educated, lower unemployed, less impoverished, higher income, and less black. This analysis can be confirmed using the subsequent maps. The second map shows Wells Fargo's footprint based on education. The bank operates in areas with higher educational levels, avoiding less educated zip codes. The third map shows Wells Fargo's footprint by unemployment. The bank serves areas with lower rates of unemployment, avoiding higher unemployment zip codes. The fourth map shows Wells Fargo's footprint by poverty status. The bank operates in zip codes with lower poverty rates. The fifth map shows Wells Fargo's footprint by income. Wells Fargo operates in Fulton County zip codes that have significantly higher levels of income. Finally, the last map shows that the bank operates in fewer black zip codes. It is confusing that Wells Fargo received an outstanding score on its lending tests when branch locations play a significant role in this score. Regulators should be asked to explain this confusing situation. I believe Attorney Crump will raise these and other questions about the bank's performance and community support.